Prime Minister Mark Carney is kicking off his minority mandate at a brisk pace. Next Tuesday, he'll head to Washington for his first meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump. Carney says the immediate priority is to get Trump's tariffs off Canadian goods. The following week, Carney plans to swear in his cabinet, though no specific day has been set. But Parliament will return on May 26th. And the next day, King Charles will be here in Ottawa to deliver the government's throne speech. Here are just a few of the key items on Carney's to-do list. The Prime Minister has promised a middle-class tax cut by July 1st. He also wants to remove all trade barriers between provinces and territories by July 1st. Carney is vowing to make bail harder to access for violent and organized criminals. And he wants to balance the government's day-to-day spending, what he calls the operating budget, within 3 years. Now, in his press conference today, the Prime Minister also stressed how he plans to collaborate with politicians across the country.
I am committed to working with others, governing as a team in Cabinet and caucus, and working constructively across parties in Parliament, working in real partnership with provinces, territories, and Indigenous peoples.
But one Premier who will not be part of that partnership is the Premier of Newfoundland and Labrador, Andrew Furey. Furey announced back in February that he's stepping down after more than 4 years in office. The province's new Liberal leader and Premier is set to be announced tomorrow. Premier Andrew Furey joins me now. Premier, welcome back to the show. It's good to see you, sir.
Thanks, David. Thanks for having me. You were one of the first interviews I did, and now you'll be one of the last.
Well, let's talk about where things are. I mean, Mark Carney is into his early days. You're into your final days. You know, he talked about his intention to work in real partnership today with the provinces and territories. How do you see things at the First Minister's table as you get ready to give up your chair there?
I think it's excellent that Prime Minister Carney has reset the First Minister's table. I do believe that he's genuine and honest in his pursuit and approach to recreate a genuine trust between the two levels of government. And they have been frayed, maybe more in certain regions than others in the last few years. And I do believe that he's coming with an agenda of development, of industrial development, of economic diversification. And I think he truly understands that this moment of disruption with the President of the United States will afford a more aggressive and strategic agenda. And I can speak for me in the last couple of days, I know that Newfoundland and Labrador will fully participate in that.
You know, there's a lot of focus, obviously, on oil and gas development, primarily looking at Alberta and Saskatchewan, but Newfoundland and Labrador is an oil-producing province as well. And I know you've expressed some skepticism about the emissions cap, may violate, you know, the Atlantic Accord agreement you have as a province with the federal government. But where do you think Mark Carney needs to land on issues around pipelines and conventional energy, as he calls it, oil and gas development, to sort of get the economic boost and satisfy some of the geographic and regional tensions that are there?
Sure. I think that the Prime Minister understands, and I think every Canadian understands, that our oil and gas product is incredibly valuable. It's given the geopolitical disruption in the world and the disruptive markets right now, Canada has the product that the world needs, and we can't be embarrassed by that. Canadians are smart enough to hold two thoughts in their head at once. You can understand the value of oil and gas while it's valuable by also recognizing that you would like to diversify the energy portfolio across the country. I don't take those as mutually exclusive and competing interests. I think that Canada can do both of those at the same time, and I think the Prime Minister understands that. With respect to your opening premise, we take the position here in Newfoundland and Labrador ideologically, that perhaps the emissions cap currently in its current form is not the right policy instrument for oil and gas development to meet the global demands and to meet what Canada has to offer right now. Right. But more specifically with respect to Newfoundland and Labrador, I just want to highlight, because you mentioned it, David, the importance of the Atlantic Accord and the fact that the Atlantic Accord does supersede this other piece of legislation. But we would be there to support oil and gas development across the country. It's important, it's needed for Canada, and it's needed for the world. Yeah,
he signaled a flexibility on that. We don't yet know where it's going to land, and the details are really going to matter there. But he's also signaled an ambition to have free trade in Canada by Canada Day, knock down all those internal trade barriers. I know there are certain specific components of your economy, like, well, the breweries would be affected by this. Do you think it's realistic that everything can be done and everything can be knocked down by Canada Day this year?
Well, what's being lost in the discussion with respect to internal trade barriers is the specificity and exclusion and exemptions that occur. And so when you say everything, that's not practical for Newfoundland and Labrador, and it's not practical for Nova Scotia or any other jurisdiction, because there are some trade barriers that exist. For example, the one that Alberta used was dental hygienist mobility. They're allowed to give general anesthetic in Alberta, and they're licensed to do so, but they're not licensed to do so, nor trained to do so here in Newfoundland and Labrador.
Right.
So it would be dangerous for Alberta to take a dental hygienist on par from Newfoundland and Labrador and go to Alberta. Specifically in Newfoundland and Labrador, though, I'm excited that he stated that he's willing to eliminate the federal purview internal trade barriers. So one of the most important ones for Newfoundland and Labrador would be Marine Atlantic, and we look forward to him reducing, if not eliminating, the fees, because that is a vital piece of infrastructure for trade for us to the rest of Canada. In addition, I would love to see him continue to do what Prime Minister ToDo did and what Minister LeBlanc did in twinning our highways. David, as you know, that was a promise made in the 80s, never really fulfilled.
Right.
But we're talking about big pieces of infrastructure that meet environmental concerns, that meet transportation concerns, safety concerns, nation-building ideas. Well, there's a great one.
Well, you're into your final days. Tomorrow, in fact, Liberal members in Newfoundland and Labrador are going to vote to pick your replacement. It's going to be one of the two Johns, John Abbott or John Hogan, both cabinet ministers.
It'll be a John.
It'll be a John. We do know that for sure. What is the biggest issue? I mean, it's an election year in Newfoundland and Labrador as well. What is the biggest issue you think your successor is going to have to deal with right out of the gate once you hand over the keys to the Premier's office?
I think right out of the gate, there's no question, it will be the continued pressure, the continued consequent uncertainty from the President of the United States. And that will require a calm, strategic approach. It will also require continued dialogue with local stakeholders, unions, and industry representatives. And we've set up a table that I hope the next Premier continues with to ensure that those voices are heard. We've built in a $200 million contingency to allow the provincial government to deal with any particular dynamics that occur with respect to the erratic and, let's face it, ever-changing opinions of the President of the United States. So I think that will be top of mind. And as a consequence of that, we're finally starting to see some of the pressures of those decisions with respect to households. So
right.
The cost of living pressures that I faced in my government with respect to post-COVID inflation, now we're seeing that again with respect to the President of the United States decisions with respect to trade and tariffs. So I think there has to be some flexibility, some understanding, and some empathy with respect to how you approach that from a policy perspective, but also how you approach it from a human perspective in terms of how these erratic, ill-shaped policies from the President are impacting people's tables and people's lives.
When you look at your accomplishments as Premier, if there is a signature legacy item, it's probably going to be that memorandum of understanding you signed with Premier Legault from Quebec on reopening and extending the Churchill Falls project. But it's not finalized. Are you worried as you leave? I remember Danny Williams announced Muskrat Falls and he left and it went sideways. You've announced Churchill Falls and you're leaving. You worry, you wonder, will it go sideways? I mean, what are your thoughts on leaving without that completely buttoned down?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's always going to be a concern. But look, we set out very different than Mr. Williams' approach to Muskrat Falls. We had lessons learned from Muskrat Falls. We had lessons learned from Churchill Falls 1. That memorandum of understanding, even different than some of the other MOUs, by the way, you would have covered, David, in the past, is very prescriptive. And it's more than just a spirit of cooperation MOU. It is fairly prescriptive. We took a different approach in that we wanted that MOU in the public arena so that there was public discourse. The CEO of Newfoundland and Labrador Hydro actually held virtual town halls so people could ask questions directly to her. We brought it to the House of Assembly. We brought in an unusual and unprecedented debate, brought experts onto the floor of the House of Assembly, our legislature here in the province, and had questions asked by members of the House of Assembly. We voted on it. And now we've set up an oversight committee within government and one outside of government that will ensure that this is progressing as it should. Ultimately, then that will come back to the House of Assembly for further debate. So different than some of the other agreements, this has, in my opinion, been this has been designed and engineered so that there's plenty of input from the public, plenty of oversight to prevent the mistakes of the past. And a path has been laid out in that MOU that is one built on fairness and future-proofing for people of Newfoundland and Labrador.
So you'll be leaving the cabinet table, just as a final point, and going back to the operating table, because you're an orthopedic surgeon, and you're going to go back to your medical
I won't
career.
be on the table, David.
No, well, no, but you'll be around it, I would presume. You're going back to your medical career, but you have not closed the door to a return to politics. I mean, is it possible we see you running federally in Newfoundland and Labrador 5-10 years down the road? Because you're a young man, you're younger than I am. Is that in the cards for you, do you think, Premier?
I have enjoyed immensely the privilege to serve as Premier. And there will, as you know, David, the call of public service is very deeply entrenched in my family. And I would feel that same honor and privilege to be able to serve in the future should the opportunity present itself.
Okay. Well, Premier Andrew Furey, good luck in the final days, and good luck to whichever John takes over. But thanks for being here, sir. We appreciate the time.
Thanks, David. And thanks for all your help over the years. You're doing a great job.